He ignored my birthday again. No call, no message, not even a half-hearted busy today, we'll celebrate later. Just silence. But the moment my Tesla Model S showed up online, with a $95,000 price tag and my name attached, my phone lit up like it finally mattered. Where did you get the money? My dad demanded, his voice sharp, almost accusing. Not proud, not curious, suspicious. And then, like clockwork, family meeting, tomorrow, 7 p.m. I stared at the screen, the same way I used to stare at the empty chair across the table on birthdays, watching my brother unwrap gifts while I got forgotten excuses. I could still hear the laughter from those nights, how they called him the genius, how they called me still figuring things out. But this time, something had changed. The leather seat beneath me was real. The quiet hum of the car was real. The success they never believed in, real. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt dangerous. I'm the kind of person people describe with a pause. He's different. That pause followed me my entire life, especially at home. In a family that valued loud success, I was the quiet variable no one bothered to solve. My younger brother was the blueprint. Top grades, scholarships, constant praise. My dad loved telling people about him, repeating his achievements like headlines. When it came to me, the story always changed. He's still figuring things out, he'd say, with a polite smile that felt more like a disclaimer than support. I learned early that attention in our house wasn't given, it was earned. And somehow nothing I did ever qualified. Birthdays were the clearest example. Mine came and went like an afterthought, while my brother's felt like national holidays. I stopped expecting anything after I turned 16. It was easier that way, so I built my life quietly. No announcements, no requests for approval. I took risks they would have called stupid, made decisions they would have shut down, and failed in ways they never saw. And slowly, without their permission, I started winning. Not loudly, not visibly, just enough to disappear on my own terms. The insults were never loud. That would have been easier to confront. Instead, they came dressed as casual moments, small enough to dismiss, but sharp enough to stay. At dinner, my dad would ask my brother about his day first. Always first, leaning forward, nodding, listening like every word mattered. When it was my turn, the question felt recycled. "And you?" he'd say, already reaching for his glass, eyes drifting somewhere else before I even answered. Sometimes I didn't answer at all. No one noticed. There were other things, subtle, almost invisible patterns. My brother's opinions carried weight. Mine were met with polite silence. If I suggested something, it would hang in the air, unacknowledged, until someone else repeated it later, and suddenly it was brilliant. My mom had a way of softening it, but even that stung. "You know how your father is," she'd whisper, like it was a weather condition we all had to live with, like I was supposed to adjust myself around it. And then there were the looks, the quick glance between them when I spoke about my plans, not mocking, just doubtful, controlled, measured, as if they had already decided how my story would end, and were simply waiting for me to catch up. The turning point didn't come with an argument. No slammed doors, no dramatic exit. It came quietly, on a random Tuesday, when I overheard my dad on the phone. "He's not like his brother," he said, his tone low, almost apologetic. "I don't expect much from him." I wasn't meant to hear it. That was the part that stayed with me. I stood there in the hallway, invisible as always, realizing that this wasn't temporary. It wasn't a phase I could outgrow, or a misunderstanding I could fix. In his mind, my story had already been written, small, uncertain, unfinished, and for the first time, I stopped trying to prove him wrong. That same week, I made decisions I had been postponing for years. I moved my savings into a business idea I had kept to myself. It wasn't reckless, it was calculated, tested quietly over months while everyone assumed I was drifting. I stopped sharing updates, stopped explaining my time, my work, my direction, and something shifted. Without their constant doubt echoing in my head, things started working. Slowly at first, then all at once. Clients came in, numbers grew. Opportunities stacked on top of each other. By the time they noticed anything had changed, I was already somewhere they couldn't reach, and I realized I didn't need them to believe in me. I just needed them to keep underestimating me. I didn't rush the next step. If they were finally paying attention, I wanted them to see exactly what I chose to show, nothing more. The family meeting wasn't about concern, it was about control. I knew that, so I treated it like any other negotiation. That night, I sat at my desk and prepared, not emotionally, but structurally. I reviewed every account in my name, separated anything that could be questioned, and documented the rest. business registrations, tax filings, contracts with clients. Everything was clean, traceable, mine. I even printed summaries, not to prove anything, but to make a point. I had built this without them. Then I drew a line they couldn't see yet. No more shared financial visibility. No casual updates. No room for opinions disguised as advice. I changed passwords, rerouted communication through professional channels, and made sure every agreement I had going forward stood on its own legally and independently. It wasn't anger driving me. It was clarity. For years they had defined my role without asking me. This was the first time I defined it myself. By the end of the night, I wasn't thinking about what I'd say at 7 p.m. I was thinking about what I wouldn't say, and how silence, used correctly, could say everything. I arrived at 6:58 p.m., not early, not late, just on time, like everything else now. They were already seated. My dad at the head of the table, my brother beside him, relaxed, curious. My mum gave me a small, cautious smile, like she wasn't sure what version of me had walked in. No one spoke for a moment. Then my dad leaned forward. "So," he said, fingers steepled, "explain the car. Not how are you, not are you okay. Just the car." I placed a thin folder on the table and slid it toward him. He didn't open it immediately, but I saw the shift in his eyes, the hesitation. Control slipping, just slightly. "It's all there," I said, calm. "Business registrations, income records, contracts. Everything's legal. Everything's mine." Silence stretched across the table as he finally opened it. Pages turning, numbers speaking where I didn't. My brother leaned in, scanning, his expression tightening. Not dismissive this time, but recalculating. "But you should have told us," my mum said softly. I met her gaze, steady. "You never asked." No anger, no raised voice. Just truth, placed carefully where it couldn't be ignored. And for the first time, no one had anything to say back. The silence didn't break. It settled. My dad closed the folder slower than he'd opened it, like the weight of it had changed. His usual certainty was gone, replaced by something quieter, harder to name. Not pride, not yet, just absence of doubt. My brother leaned back, arms crossed. But this time it wasn't confidence, it was distance. The kind you create when the comparison you relied on no longer works in your favor. "You've been doing all this alone?" my mom asked, her voice careful. I nodded. That was the only way it worked. No one argued with that. The meeting ended without a conclusion. No lectures, no advice. Just a quiet understanding that something had shifted permanently. I wasn't the unfinished version of myself anymore, and they didn't know how to relate to the finished one. In the days that followed, the change was subtle but real. My dad called more, but differently. Measured, respectful. My brother stopped, correcting me mid-sentence. Even the way they looked at me had changed. Like they were recalibrating a story they'd told for years. But the real consequence wasn't theirs. It was mine. I no longer needed their approval to feel complete. And once that changes, everything else does too. I used to think closure would feel louder. Like a moment where everything gets said, where old wounds are acknowledged, where someone finally admits they were wrong. But standing in the quiet that followed, I realized something simpler. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you take back. I didn't cut them off completely, not out of obligation, but out of choice. The difference mattered. I set boundaries where there used to be silence, distance where there used to be expectation. And for the first time, those boundaries held. We still spoke. I occasionally had dinner, but the dynamic had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. They were careful now, respectful in a way that felt unfamiliar, almost fragile. Like they understood finally that access to me wasn't guaranteed. As for me, I kept building, quietly, expanding what I started, investing, creating space for a life that didn't revolve around proving anything to anyone. Because that was the real victory. Not the car, not the money, not even the look on my dad's face when he realized he'd been wrong. It was this, peace without permission, and the understanding that the best revenge isn't being seen. It's no longer needing to be